Welcome to Adventures in Solitaire. Today we'll be discussing AI and its impacts on role-playing and solo role-playing. So as mentioned in the intro, as always, today we'll be discussing AI and its impact on role-playing and solo role-playing, but primarily solo role-playing. So why this? Why now? I was prepping to do a review of the second edition of the Mythic Game Master Emulator, which I'm still going to do. I've actually got it printed out now, so I can go over that, and I should have some more time to do so now that the family is no longer at home due to poor weather. We had them at home for a little over a week, so that was fun. But in that preparation, as I began to kind of watch AI, I watch pretty much anything and everything science. I have a lot of my news feeds and I have news like apps and stuff set to science related stuff. I enjoy following science. It became clear to me that we may actually be reaching a point where the kind of tools that we use as GMs or solo role players or just role players in general are poised to change. And I was a little worried that some of the videos that I was prepping to do, and I will still do, videos in the past, as well as content, solo content, may kind of become obsolete. And I'm going to kind of discuss why I don't think that they will become obsolete, why I still think that there's a need for it, but I also kind of want to discuss the need for AI in a solo environment, and possibly even in a non-solo environment. And I am very careful with that word need, because I can see it becoming a need. There is a barrier to entry for solo role playing, and it's sharp, and AI gets rid of it to a great extent. I was exceptionally impressed. I have used AI in the past, probably about a year or more ago, that was specifically geared for role playing and generating narratives, and I honestly wasn't that impressed. I wasn't real happy with it. But for me, that's changed, and it's only going to continue to change, probably for the better, in regards to how it can support our role-playing sessions. So that's why I'm here today. And as far as other topics that I'm going to discuss how to do it. It's incredibly simple. Actually, I'm just going to do that now. If you know how to text, if you know how to use a messenger service, you're already way, way ahead of the game, because it is much more simpler than that. It is and I'll show an image of it, but and I'm talking about, by the way, Chat GPT, okay, which is about to become, I think, part of the search for Bing. I don't know if you'll be able to use it there or if you'll have to use it in this fashion elsewhere, but it is simply a chat box. You have where you type, and then it responds above. You type, it responds. You type, it responds. There are no other tools here. That's it. Now, I had set mine up because although I can type at a pretty reasonable speed, I still don't like texting and typing. That may be my ADHD there. But I set mine up for voice, which is super simple on a phone, by the way, because the phones typically have that little microphone button you can hit. So I did not proof some of my examples of my conversation, which I copied and pasted. So the voice didn't always carry over real well, but the AI still understood what I was trying to say. So it's really that simple to use. There is a little bit more nuance here, but still incredibly cool. And we'll get into that. So specifically, the system that I used for this was Hostile. Now, I did not define Hostile solo, though that's something I'm going to try to do some videos on pretty soon here. I was using it to kind of prep for this in a way and kind of test this setting, specifically because this is so rich with information online, which is where this program gets its information. So I really wanted a setting that was fully fleshed out, and that wouldn't be so common, because I could go for D&D, but that can be pretty neutral as well. So, but anyway, I went with this. And so let's go over some of the examples. Let's go over what this looks like. So I'm going to show examples of the text, the texting back and forth that I had with this AI. And although I didn't include all of it, most of it's there, the vast majority of it. So I tell it that I'm playing what game I'm playing, and I ask it to generate an encounter. I'm not going to read through all this because it's a lot, but it does a really amazing job of describing what's going on. But my problem with what it did here is that it provided me with more information that I wanted, right? This is stuff that I want to discover on my own, and it is just telling me stuff ahead of time. So in this example, it says I traveled a remote part of space. My sensors detected a distress signal from a nearby freighter that I investigated. We find out that it's been taken hostage by a group of space pirates. They're demanding ransom for the release. And I have to... Oh, by the way, the pirates are heavily armed and they're not going to hesitate to use their weapons. Now, a GM might do this. It's actually not bad. I was actually pretty impressed with this. But I wanted to actually discover that this was going on. So I'm traveling around and I detect this distress signal. That's kind of about where I would have wanted it to stop. I would have wanted to discover from there. So here's what I did. I said, can you generate another encounter but only list the initial part of the encounter? You are providing details that I would rather ask about and then find out about. So it does it again. And it really just tells me that there's a strange signal and that it's coming from an abandoned space station, and that there's armed ships, and that we receive a hailing message from an unknown source, and it demands that we leave the area immediately. Now, that's in complete relation to the same event that it generated for me, and it's totally on theme of what it had done, and that's pretty much exactly what I was looking for. So this was great. So I moved on. I wanted to kind of test its knowledge a little bit here. So I asked it to describe the theme, what the main draw is and what sets it apart from other pen and paper. And it did a pretty good job. You can pause here and read over this, but I'm going to move on. The next thing I wanted to do, and here's the thing. When we are solo role-playing, one of the hardest things I think that as solo role-players that we can have to deal with is social encounters. And even combat encounters. Combat and social are very tightly blended in that we're still dealing with interaction with someone else that's making decisions. It's not a place that we're discovering. It's not asking whether there's a chest in the room or things like that. So, if an AI could generate a social back and forth, that would be incredible. So I wanted to kind of test how it handles those things. So that's what I did. So I try to find somebody... this is where it didn't type it in right, or it didn't translate right on the voice. I try to find somebody at a spaceport that we've just landed on. Who do I find? It understood anyway. And it describes me stepping off and what that looks like. I didn't ask for that. So great that it did that. But then for example, it says, a gruff-looking smuggler surrounded by shady individuals trying to offload some questionable goods. I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. Wait a minute. I have a few problems here. How do I know he's a smuggler? How do I know that they're shady looking? And how do I know that those are questionable looking goods? I didn't make a roll for that, right? Now, a GM might, again, have provided some of this, but I doubt they would have told me it was a smuggler. Maybe that the individual was shady. So I had a problem with this. But again, the AI, say he, she, them, it. The AI continues on. So, and it does the same thing. So what I do is I say the following. I don't think I would know so much detail about the people I see at the spaceport. I wouldn't know that someone is a smuggler without rolling for a skill check to see if I could tell what their trade skills were or what they were doing. Can you generate the exact same list without the extra detail about the characters? So it says, of course, here's a revised list of the list without the extra detail. Now this is great. It said a person surrounded by others, a trader shouting prices, which would be obvious, a group of tired crew members, pretty obvious. You could probably tell by the way they were dressed. Okay, probably no skill check needed for that, the GM might say. A pilot checking their ship, maybe. A group of individuals scanning the crowd. Yeah. And it's completely relevant to the last one. Great job there. I'm going somewhere with this, so just hang in here with me. Example of making a task resolution roll. I wanted to test this as well. So I go ahead and I tell it that I use my corral skill without explaining the system to it, by the way. Did I use my corral skill, which is a 1, I roll a 7, I tell it my intelligence. It gets the rules a little wrong, and I correct it later. Or either that or it self-corrects. I don't remember. But it became a non-issue. And on the next one, I ask it, I walk up to a person surrounded by others to see what they're up to. What is the difficulty of the task? Now, here's where it balks. It tells me that it's up to the game master, basically, and that there's a lot of different things that can change what the difficulty is. Well, that's not what I'm asking. I specifically wanted the numeric difficulty. I ask it to do it again, but it kind of repeats itself, this time provided a range of difficulty that it could be. It's not what I'm wanting. So then I move on. And I say, I don't want the rules for task difficulty. I am asking you to randomly determine the difficulty of the situation. What is the difficulty to determine what they're up to in this situation? And it apologizes. Of course, I feel bad. Sillily enough, I do. I apologize for the confusion. To determine the difficulty of the situation, you can roll this. And it says that it's determined that the difficulty is standard. I'm sorry. I roll that. I get tired of messing with it, and I actually just roll it, and I did make the determination. I fix this later, by the way, and I'll explain how I fix this for the AI. And I asked what I discover about the person who is surrounded, and it's saying what might be there, and that as a game master, it's up to me. We continue to run into this. This is where we start having some problems with the AI. But again, I fix this, and this is pretty cool, I think, anyway. So, in example 5, continued example of task resolution, I say, I'm asking you to decide what is the character up to? What is my character to discover? And so it kind of gives me some rules there, and it's been giving me rules a lot, and I already know the rules. I don't need it to pitch them to me. So I tell it, going forward, unless I specifically ask for the rules to be explained, can you not explain them to me? Understood, I'll refrain from explaining the rules. And by the way, it doesn't explain them anymore, anymore at all in that chat, which is great. And the chats are saved, by the way, so you can always go back days later. So example number 6, and continued with the social interaction. I want to ask the smuggler what they're looking for, but I don't want to scare him off. I want to see if it's possible that I might be able to maybe help him somehow. I roll an 8 and a +1 for crowds. What happens? So it goes into a discussion about the game master again, and it being up to the game master and stuff like that. I have to kind of determine the difficulty of the task on my own, so I do that. And I just continue to ask it some questions, and it continues to talk about the game master, meaning to make these choices. So I say, I want you to make the determination on the decisions. In instances where you would say, you could decide, because it would do that a lot. It would say, you could decide to do this, or you could decide to do that. So I said, in instances where you would say, you could decide, I want you to make those decisions, not me. Do you understand this? Now, I felt bad about how I worded that because it seemed pretty abrupt, but too late, too little. I hit enter, and that's what I said. Understood. In this case, the task resolution roll resulted in a 9, indicating that your character's attempt to start a conversation with the smuggler without arousing suspicion has failed. As a game master, I have determined. So at this point, it's beginning to understand that I want it to be the game master. I think there was a point, and it looks like I may have forgotten to copy that over, that I specifically told it that I wanted it to play the role of the game master. That I wanted it to be making these decisions. And so it starts to begin to make these choices, and it stops doing this thing where it's saying, you could. That's up to the game master. Generally, a game master would make this, it just starts doing it. It starts giving me the values as it determines. And the great thing that I found is that the values it was assigning it, the bonuses, the subtractions, the rolls, all of that were right down the middle. I didn't have to talk to it about what the task resolution rules were either. It understood that system without me explaining it to it, which was great. I begin to fail rolls with this system, and I end up in a situation where I talk to the people surrounding the smuggler to get some more information so that when I go back, maybe I'll have a better chance of it. It ends up telling me that I get a +1 because of the information that I've gained. And I go back and I talk to the smuggler. And when I make my roll, it forgets about the +1, and I have to remind it. And then it corrects itself. It's kind of like, oh, I'm sorry, my bad. You're right. Yeah, that would be this. In this case, this happens. So that was nice. And it was really weird, though, because, as an AI, you kind of expect it to be really efficient. And you don't expect it to function at the level of a GM that might forget. So in all honesty, it was actually kind of bringing me in to a GM player relationship where I don't think that was its intent. I think it was an honest mistake on the part of the AI, but it certainly did feel that way. I thought that was kind of interesting. So I ask when I make the successful roll, and this is interesting. So what happens with a smuggler now? It says, as a game master, I would determine the outcome of your interaction with the smuggler based on a roll of an 8 with a total bonus of +2 from crowds on the prior success roll. With a total of 10, you might have made a persuasive or charming impression on the smuggler, or possibly even gain their trust. However, the exact outcome would depend on the specific circumstances and the smuggler's individual personality and motivations. Now, this is a problem. I need it to do that. So here's what I tell it. Can you determine the smuggler's individual personality and motivations? And also going forward, I need you to determine the individual personality and motivations. I don't need to know them, but you can determine them yourself. Keep the info hidden from me unless I ask for it directly, or where a game mechanic or event would require you to divulge that info. Does that make sense? Understood. I will determine the smuggler's individual personality and motivations, but keep that information hidden unless necessary or requested by you. It understood my logic and what I was trying to dictate. I wanted to be very careful because if I told it unless I ask it to, then we have a problem because as a GM, it needs to be able to have the prerogative to give that information based on game mechanics or situations that could come up outside of a role. So I wanted to try and make that very clear and precise, and it got it. And it started doing exactly that, which meant it was holding information somehow hidden. Now, how long it will hold that information hidden in our conversation, if it's storing those values and variables somewhere in the background that I can't see, I don't know. But it was interesting how it played it out. So basically I get to the point where the smuggler is telling me that there's like a rare or valuable artifact that's located somewhere in the vicinity, might be hidden away in a cave system nearby, and he offers to pay a generous sum. And at this point, I begin to ask the AI how much, or the smuggler in this case, that the AI is playing, and they basically tell me that it's going to be worth my effort. It will be worth the time. And it keeps repeating, the smuggler repeats himself. So I ask the smuggler to give me a ballpark figure on the amount. I tell them if they cannot give me a range of value on the amount, then I cannot help them. And the smuggler dodges again. It's enough to make my wow worded differently this time. And I'm like, well, okay, now does the AI just simply not know money in this universe? And so I'm worried that it's dodging it on purpose because it doesn't know. So I try to play with it a little bit longer before I outright ask the AI about the economy in the system because I don't want to fiddle with it. I want to see what it's capable of. So I talk to the smuggler again. I say, I mentioned that they are talking in circles and that they are dodging the question, to which it says the following, and this kind of surprised me. The smuggler seems taken aback by your direct approach and bluntness. They pause for a moment and then respond. All right, I can see that you're a no-nonsense kind of person. I'll give you a rough estimate. The item I am looking for is worth around 10,000 credits on the black market. And so that's the last of my examples here. Now, one of the things that, and I played around with it more after, though I did not copy screen grabs of that, but one of the things that I started to notice is that there were some rules where it was kind of a little off, and I think that was primarily because it was trying to go off the original hostile rule setting and not solo. So one of the things that I did was, because I happen to have the PDF copy of hostile solo, is I started a new chat and I began to introduce it specifically to the setting for this, for the rules for this, and I began to test it on those rules. It would fudge a little bit, and I would work with it. And then I would say, okay, what you're doing right now, this is good. Let's try it again to make sure. Yes, very good. Let's continue to do this. So whenever I say do this, or whenever this happens, let's continue it this way. So basically, when it's like I'm having a conversation with a person, I'm saying, yes, you understand the rules. Now you got it. You got it. That's right. That's how we're going to do this going forward. You nailed it. We don't need to learn any more about that. We can move on. It's just that you have to be very, very specific about how you word it, which isn't, again, that similar from talking to a person. We still have to be careful and specific about how we word and how we teach so we don't confuse the person we're teaching. And I am having to teach an AI. It's hard not to say someone, but I am having to teach a system to make sure that it understands. So it's really kind of a blending there. So I guess the point here is that if I wanted to, as of right now today, sit down and have a full on out role playing system with this book right here, without really having to address too much more anymore about the rules and how it's played, I can do that. I don't need to have these. I don't need to have these tables anymore, right? I don't need these. It will do this as a GM would. We roll on these as a GM because we need some idea generators, or we roll this as a solo role please on these tables, these oracles, because we want external prompts, right? But if we have a GM, unless you don't want to work with that GM, and this GM is pretty neutral, and it will cater itself to you. If you don't like how it's talking with you, if you want to change it and you want it to act like someone, you can tell it to act like someone in the style of someone. It can be who you want. You can tell it when you don't like something, and it's very courteous and polite. So if that draws your interest, then really there shouldn't be much to keep you from having your own personalized game master. You'll have to work with them a little. You'll have to. It's a game master that's never role played the system that wants to do this for you, but it needs your guidance. We'll do they. They need your guidance, right? And so you'll talk to them and you'll explain this to them. No, you kind of got that wrong. It's more like this, just like you would with a normal person. And once you get that set up, it's set up. There's some caveats to this, and there's some conversation yet to be had. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about some of the caveats. So one of them is that you don't know, even though the chats are saved, we don't know when there might be a server reset. So all this buildup you've had over the course of a month, maybe, or a week, or a few days, or a day, whatever that looked like for you for your setup, that may be gone, as you've trained it to kind of like you do, like say Pandora, where the Pandora channel is. It's been trained for over the time to cater a channel to you. But what you can do is you can copy that content and paste it on in and use that as a reference. So I think that the question then is there room for our tables and our prompts? And so I'd had a discussion with my son. I wanted some back and forth on this to kind of help me along, so I wasn't just, bouncing off a wall and hitting myself with those questions. And, one of the things that he had brought up is that I feel like it's less personal, he said. I said, well, what do you mean it's less personal? He goes, well, when I'm rolling on the tables and stuff, because we play cooperative a lot, me and him. But he started to do it on his own, so I was really proud of that. But he says, when we're rolling on the tables, we're doing that together. And that's a story that we're creating, or it's a story that I create. And I pushed back a little bit for the purpose of conversation. And I said, well, so what you're telling me is that you want bias. And this took him a little bit, because I was suggesting the personalization that he wanted was internal biases that we were presenting. That we were influencing what was happening because of some, and that's just there. It's going to be there with solo role playing. So we try to get around that with these tables. We try to eliminate that bias. We try to let the system react to us and us react to the system. But his argument wasn't that. It was that you do lose that thing. He said, look, and we got down to it, and it's really about creativity and spontaneity and being excited about what's come up with. Kind of like passing a circle around a campfire story. You have your story you're telling, but someone else modifies that, much like these do. And as a group, you modify that story. and you lose that. And I found that this is exceptionally similar to the age old argument that has been had for solo role players. You can't replace a GM, and that's true. You can't replace the experience of a GM in a group. You just can't, for the group or for the GM. And it's similar here in that you can't replace that cooperative or that solo experience with that creativity with an AI, right? So there's some self intimacy and group intimacy that you're not going to have. But I think that it has its place, because there are going to be individuals, like I barely became a solo role player, just barely. I had to get over this hump of this, what I felt was a steep learning curve, to get myself to where I was incredibly, insanely comfortable with solo role playing. Like, I am totally comfortable with that now. I easily could have not had that happen. And if that had happened, the AI would have been my only way to do this, and I would have been happy to use that AI, because it can absolutely fulfill the role of a GM at this point. And so I think that there's a place for it for those that don't want to mess with the tables, that don't want to have a personal bias, that aren't concerned with that intimacy, who aren't wanting to maybe have some sort of creative writing practice, as some like to refer to solo role playing. That seems to be a big topic of debate about whether it's creative writing or not, really, in the end. And I think it can lay somewhere in the range of creative writing, but it still feels reactionary to me, though. So I think that the AI can help with that. And I almost have to wonder which one I'm going to prefer, because I don't know yet. I know I had a lot of fun with being surprised, though I did feel a little empty, like my son had suggested. So let's move on a little bit, and let's talk a bit about other things that we can do with AI beyond just utilizing it as a GM, because it has its uses, and I was really surprised with this as well. So one of the things I wanted to see if it could do is if it could generate information for me, because I don't always have the tables here for solo role playing that I want. And so I began to ask it to generate tables, and it did. And I asked it for a D66 table specifically for Hostel for certain things. So now at any point where I want to have a themed table around a certain types of encounters, I could literally create my own book of encounters, right? And just totally cater it to me and my whims and my desires. I can remove what I don't like from what it gives me and have it replace it. And I don't have to go fishing for oracles anymore. It can be a totally customized book. And I love that. And it can do it on the fly and just continually modify. So that was good. And it could even do that with like your one single word prompts, like your descriptors, or your themed, like when you make a roll and you get the word chaos. You make another roll and you get the word light. You make another roll and you get the word sojourn. And so you have to figure out what those words mean in context of the situation, right? You can generate, like, for example, give me a table of single word prompts that have to do with space horrors. And give me a list of 100 different entries. And then it'll do that. It'll generate words. And you can just say, I want them to be theme words, or I want them to be action words, or descriptor words. And you can have it do that. So you can totally expand these one words to be very specific to the situations that you're in. You can have it generate social encounters and responses and stuff. So you can even, if you wanted to, partially use this and partially use the AI. I think my biggest hang up for the AI has been that I'm very much a physical person here. And I'm not a big fan of using digital content. But because I could just grab my phone and hit the speaker button and then have it reply, it really didn't feel as intrusive to me for me as what I had going on. You can also, with the right software, you can get it to talk back to you. You can talk to it and have a conversation. So pretty interesting stuff. And I think that probably the next generation of solo role players when they start looking and not asking people around them that have been old school like me or like you, if they try to discover it on their own, they're going to walk into a world of AI that's much more profound than what we have now, and much more capable and much more trained and tailored to the topic. So I have to wonder how many people will be left doing it the way that we used to do it, the way we do it now. So anyway, I knew that when I was going to be, like I said, when I was going to be making content in the future, content I've already made, that some of that may eventually become a thing of the past. Not in I think it will always have a place, but for a lot of people, I think that it's going to be an extreme niche. I'm still going to continue to release content, and you can expect to see that I'll still continue to do reviews and stuff. It's not like I'm giving up. It's not like I'm going to move to AI. It has nothing to do with it. But rather, I saw that this was going to be coming, and this is where things are headed, and I felt like I needed to have a moment to talk about it. Just to address it, and then two, to kind of show, like, if this is something you like, go, like, take advantage of this. Because as a solo role player, if you really want that GM experience, you can finally for the most part have it in a way that you've never been able to have it before, if this has always bothered you. And I would hate to deprive someone of that simply because this is the way that I do things, or that I may not want to go to AI for whatever personal purpose I have. I was totally impressed and blown away. And things are only going to get better in the way that AI handles those things. I think there's some conversation to be be had about ethics and morality and copyright and all this other stuff that a lot of us are hearing going on right now. But that's a whole huge other debate. But otherwise, just focusing on what good it does for this hobby, I think that it has a lot of good that it can offer. So anyway, as always, if you've listened this far or not, thank you so very much for taking the time to listen, and I'll see you again soon. Thanks.